Perfect. Thanks so much for chatting with me and with CBC Arts. And as I was mentioning, yes, you are a hit with everyone that I've spoken to. Also, my friends, super fans, who I like, who know you, absolutely love like your character, the storyline, and everything. So it's so nice to connect with you. I was more the Drake years, but now that having seen the
Okay.
documentary, I understand so much more. So
So
I
do I, Hillary.
yeah,
So do I.
I bet. Do you want to share a little bit of like your experience being like not only on the show, but like part of the documentary and revisiting this like such an important time in your life?
Sure. I mean, it's been a couple of decades now that I've been out of the limelight, so to
Hmm.
speak,
Hmm.
right? But the the fandom or the people who love Degrassi have never gone away. So even though I haven't been in front of the camera necessarily, I'm still reached out to on a regular basis on social media with a lot of accolades of people who just love the show throughout all of its variations. So it's always been around, even though I left the show. And then doing the documentary was interesting in the sense that, you know, when you come in to do your interview, it's just you in isolation, right? So I hadn't seen the content of the interviews of the other folks that were being interviewed. And so it was really about my personal
Yeah.
experience on the show. I, like you, have had a preview of the documentary. And wow, I learned a lot. Like,
Hmm.
yes, it brought back a lot of memories about my generation on the show and that nostalgia for me. But just because I'm one of the older cast, you can still see that the younger cast
Yeah.
members in the various generations also have their own nostalgia, right? And all of their feel good moments, and not always feel good moments, but regardless of our age, the show kind of tackled similar, I don't want to say the same, but similar types of topics that affect youth, and then how those topics have changed with the years. But the problems, the people, the issues, the ups, the downs, they're kind of the same because we're human beings after all, right? So not only seeing that on the documentary, I learned a lot. Like, oh, I didn't know that happened, and oh, I forgot about that. So it was really interesting watching the documentary, and it brought back a lot of really good memories. And then my safety net, Stacy Mistician, her and I watched it together.
Right.
So we actually did our interviews on the same day, even though we didn't see each
Yeah.
other's interviews. We were like, let's watch it together because you have no idea. You have no idea. You know, when you look at any kind of documentaries and the fact that it's not scripted, I actually get to say what I want to say, and you're always a little bit worried about, am I gonna be made out to be a villain or like just bitter or just this or that? But it was really well done, and I think it told the story in a really lovely way across the. I don't even know when the first one was. Was it 78? I feel
I
like I'm
think
the most
so.
horrible Degrassi fan ever. But throughout, you know,
Many,
the
many years.
decades, it was really nice to see that. And the story was so fluid and well put together from beginning to end.
Absolutely. And I'm curious, so like your relationship with the fans, which is going to be a very, very big part of my piece. Um, have you found that as like tech has changed and all of the ways that we interact as fandoms changed, has that even like obviously impacted you having been in multiple, versions of it? I assume now like DMing you back when it first started, when you were first in it, that accessibility wasn't an option. So are you finding that people are like even reaching out to you more frequently or in just different ways compared to back then?
And yes and no. Yes, people are still reaching out, but you're right. You know, back in the 80s, that type of thing wasn't there. But the show was so huge in Canada that, and you know, we didn't have a lot of money. So it was like, I still had to take the TTC places,
Right.
right? Like I couldn't afford a cab. So it's, you're on the way to an event where you're, you know, meeting fans and you might run into them onto the TTC. So there's a lot of awkward interactions
Sure.
with folks who just, thought you were this rich and famous individual, but no, we're just regular kids on a TV show. And I feel that maybe now that, yes, there are people getting in touch with me through social media, but I'm not as, I don't want to say as huge or as famous, but, and I don't want to say not as relevant, but I'm not in the newer show, right? So I
Yeah.
get that. I'm not as popular anymore, and that's totally okay. I'm okay with that. But so maybe people reaching out to me is just, a minimal fraction
Right.
of what others are getting. And to be honest, anything that I do get has always been very positive.
Of course.
So I haven't, not yet, or maybe I'm just, I turned a blind eye to the trolling or anything like that. I haven't had to experience that, which is
Mhm.
a totally next level type of
Right.
thing that I would say the newer generations have had to deal with, because I'm not sure if I would
Yeah.
have been very eloquent then. I was very mouthy, so I am not sure how me and that would have interacted.
I was gonna ask, how did you juggle those interactions in the 80s? Because in a way, it is more personal, just being run into, and also, the documentary talks about the fan mail and then the sometimes not so nice fan mail that you receive. So
Yes.
being young and going through that, like how was that experience for you?
I don't want to say it's because I was the oldest cast member. Maybe I'm just older than my years, but I could deal with that really, really well. I was typically a kid who very opinionated, thought for myself, but also very adult-like. So my interactions were typically very good. Now, you park that aside, and before I auditioned for the show, I had spiked hair. So people were already staring at me anyway.
Sure.
Right? So like, "Ooh, look at her hair. Wow, did you stick your finger in a light socket?" So I was already used to that kind of, "Oh, let's follow her around the mall because she's going to steal something if she goes into a store." And so I was already used to people staring at me. So when then I was on a TV show, people were actually like wanting to come up to me and talking to me, thinking that I was approachable, whereas before I wasn't. So most of the interactions were very, very positive. And I guess when you think of mail, similar to email or DM, there's still a bit of a separation. So that's when a lot of them, maybe the more negative
Mm.
type of fan mail was received. And I don't think this came out in the documentary, but there was a bit of a vetting kind of cycle where someone at Playing with Time would go through the fan mail and then weed out anything that they didn't think was appropriate to send onwards to us. Whereas with social media today, there's not that
No, there
filter,
is no
right?
barometer. Yeah, no,
Right?
of
Right.
course.
So we were a little bit sheltered, I would say, from that.
Good. And I think my last question is, I was asking Lauren Toyota this morning a bit about that, like the lightning in a bottle that was captured during this time. And I know that it was said in the documentary, but if you could just speak to, how one off in a way this show was, because it just can't seem to be recreated in the same way, no matter how many other people try, and the fact that each version of it has had such pivotal moments. And if you could speak to that, and being a part of that magic.
Yeah, to be honest, when the show first started, we had no idea it had that magic, right? Like we had no idea it was going to turn into something as special as it did, because we were just a part of it. Hey, I'm a 14-year-old on a TV show, right? This is pretty cool. Not really understanding necessarily immediately the breadth and reach that the show would have, and how it touched people in the way that it did. We were a little bit oblivious, I would say, in the first few years. And it wasn't until, the accolades came pouring in and the awards, and they're like, wow, this is actually pretty something. And it's not just the awards, but hearing how it touched people
Mhm.
in that particular way. And maybe at the time, because those stories weren't necessarily being told on a TV show where, a teenager was playing a teenager, like we were that age, we weren't 5 or 6 years older. It almost seemed innocent-ish, when you're watching someone that young have such a heavy storyline. So I I don't think we actually knew the magic until a few years later. And it's not until, because watching it, I mean, I barely watched it. Sometimes I have to be prompted about, do you remember that episode? No, I don't. I'm not sure. Can you remind me what happened in
Right.
that episode? So that type of magic, yeah, didn't really realize it at the time. It was more just as I got older, and when we went into Degrassi High, and we were still um, breaking ground in some of
Mhm.
those areas with those topics, and it was very natural, I would say. When we get to the later generations, each generation has their own way of storytelling, and you have to adapt, right? You don't want to try to recreate something unless you're doing a period piece, right? Where
Yeah.
you're stuck in that. You have to adapt with the time. So I I look at the later series, like when I was on Next Generation. Sometimes I used the word like it was much slicker, like it was really slick. And I don't mean that to be negative,
Right.
right? Because it's not a negative. It could be, yeah, maybe it's like it's got its positives and negatives, but that doesn't mean it's bad or worse. Like I think the show had to adapt to gain a new audience, but they still took the storylines in that direction that was could be hard hitting, right? So it didn't lose that essence,
Hmm.
but the storytelling and the way the stories were being told had to adapt. And hearing fans in the documentary where clearly Next Gen was their first foray into it, you can still see that magic and that impact it has had on individuals who are watching it and watching their age group at the time, which is pretty special.